Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I'm pleased to take a call on this bill and to acknowledge the work that my colleague Catherine Delahunty has done in terms of the Select Committee and generally maintaining awareness of the way this bill's been going. Sir, it's undoubted that the education sector is in need of change, and possibly there's some legislative reform required to facilitate changes in that sector. But we don't see that this bill in total delivers much of value, or that actually engages with the very serious and real and substantive issues of the day that are affecting the sector and that people in it. There is a considerable atmosphere of distrust in the entire education sector at this time. And to us, this bill, this legislation seems to be just perhaps tidying up or messing around the edges rather than really going to the heart and addressing some of those more substantive and indeed some of those more urgent issues. And it's never a bad thing to tidy up some of the small shortcomings of legislation or of practice, but really it does seem an opportunity lost and time not well spent to be dealing with the lesser issues and leaving the larger ones untouched. It's clear that the sector, the education sector as a whole, and the ministry, and dare I say it, the minister, do seem almost to be in a state of war. There's something of a battle raging out there, particularly over the future, the issue of educational assessment. The Principals Federation, the teachers' unions, several hundred boards of trustees, the Porirua City Council has had an opinion, and many parents' groups are clearly concerned at the absence of any trialling of the national standards which are being imposed. There is a perceived threat hanging over the early childhood sector as they are forced to cut quality. They're put in the unenviable position of either raising charges or cutting the quality of the service they deliver. And that is a situation they simply ought not to be put in. The tertiary sector is in some disarray as enrolments for study are capped. So in the meantime, instead of dealing with really substantive issues, we are focusing on the rules about people going to the gym and leaving their children somewhere while they go shopping in malls. There are some reasonable objectives contained with this bill connected to refund for international students. There are some useful spelling out of the relationship between schools and tertiary providers in terms of trades training. There are changes regarding teacher registration, and we have challenged those changes in terms of the process that was undertaken to achieve them, but the content of those changes, we do see some value and some benefit in those. We are voting against this bill despite the fact that there is some good content, there's some valuable change accommodated in it, but overall the bad ideas, the bad changes in this certainly outweigh the good. The ideas, the parts of this bill we cannot support clearly are ideologically consistent with the government's overall philosophy around the myth of choice and the privilege, the belief in protecting the privileged. The clauses relating to limited attendance centres were bizarre, they were very strange, in that they reduced the protection for children in order to facilitate some undefined convenience for parents. We are not disputing that those creches were limited to childcare rather than education. We agree they don't need the same level of educational scrutiny or audit or regulation. But clearly it is an absolute responsibility to ensure the safety, the protection of children, and we are pleased that that matter has been attended to. And we would acknowledge the determined campaign that has been led by Mr Mallard in order to effect that change, which we will be very happy to support that part of the bill, of the new bill. The Green Party remains fundamentally opposed to the idea of the proposed changes in the priority settings for enrolments of out-of-zone students. These changes do not accurately reflect an egalitarian approach to education, nor do they sufficiently acknowledge a mobile and diverse population. They clearly offer privilege to those parents who once attended a school or the children of members of boards of trustees, which creates a sense of entitlement among certain groups for no really robust or sound reason. Public schools need to maintain the integrity of the open access, the lack of special privilege that our education system was built upon, and that philosophy we think is certainly worth maintaining. If parents are determined that they want to maintain some sort of a dynasty, some continuation, they have the option of going private, or they can simply stay in zone. The clauses around private schools we see as an opportunity lost. The Law Commission review of private schools provided some useful recommendations, some relatively light-handed recommendations, some of which have been included, but too many of those have been ignored. The human rights of all children need to be protected in law, and we agree with at least one submitter that this has not been achieved in this bill. We are on record, as has been noted, of speaking against the late amendments brought to the Select Committee relating to the powers of the Teachers' Council. We listened to the teachers' unions who were summoned at the last minute to comment on changes to the suspension rules. And the NZEI said that they are representatives of a large professional body. They did not support the changes to the working conditions and rules governing their profession without appropriate and adequate consultation with their memberships, and we think that's a reasonable stance for them to take. There was no real argument or no substantive argument in favour of this change being rushed through. It may indeed be a good idea, but it's important that a robust process be put in place, and without such process we cannot agree to this part. We believe that the sector and the government does need to work together to deal with some of the substantive problems that are obvious and that have been mentioned, but the current climate is such that there is not the degree of engagement or trust that will enable or facilitate that open and necessary conversation. We will continue to be available, and indeed we will continue to work with and within the sector to advance that debate, which we ought to be having in this House today instead of this rather lightweight and disappointing discussion that is occurring today. And we will continue to oppose this bill. Kia ora.